Hello, everybody. Now that you have identified the unit that you want to build your mastery learning around for your students, it's time to narrow down the standards. We all know that Tennessee is a terrific example of this statement from our good friend Uncle Bob, Bob Marzano, who said 20 years ago in his studies that by and large, the sheer number of standards is one of the biggest impediments to implementing standards for teachers. And we know there have been many movements in Tennessee. I don't know if Nashville ever bought into the Max Thompson training. He called them power standards. You have other models that call them growth standards. And you have even other models like with NIET where they call them the standards that you use to get your guiding questions and your driving questions from. So whatever you call them, for our purposes for mastery, we're calling them priority standards, and we'll show you why. It makes sense when you start looking at how we identify them. Now, we know one of the issues is you have, a couple dozen standards for any given unit that you might choose. Priority standards are the ones that matter most. They're the ones that are going to represent several of the other more discrete, concrete standards that I don't want to use it, disparage it, but they kind of litter our standards documents because if you have standards that are written to higher order thinking, then students have to have mastered the lower level, more concrete knowledge standards that are there in order to do the higher order. So priority standards help you filter out and get to those standards that matter the most. So this is a prioritization of assessment in terms of mastery. It's not eliminating instruction. So you're not skipping standards, you're just packaging them in a different way to take advantage of limited time. It boils down to the thought that you can't keep 30, 32 or more standards for a single unit in your head. You can't track student progress towards it. And frankly, neither can they. So we want to give them a manageable number for their learning targets. And it's all how we package the learning and express it to them and their parents. We do it with this checklist, and this is a checklist we're providing for you. It's as simple as taking the standards that you're responsible for in your state curriculum and laying them out for the unit that you've identified that you want to do your mastery on, and just asking these questions of each of the standard statements. Is it representative of the core purpose of the unit? Is it foundational to understanding your subject area, or maybe the next course that they'll take in your subject area, or even another one that you feed into? And is it applicable? And by applicable, we mean if a student has mastered this, are they going to be able to apply it in a new and novel context that allows them to demonstrate learning? So just by being applicable, it's going to filter out all of those standards that are, list and describe, compare and contrast. Those are important and they'll be covered, but they're not priorities. So there's a three-step process. You're going to lay out your standards that you're required for whatever unit. You're going to cut and paste. We've created a digital tool. You're going to cut and paste, and you're going to ask yourself about each standard, does it meet these four criteria? Or actually the first three criteria, because manageable is about, did you wind up with fewer than 3 or more than 8 standards? So you're really looking at the first 3 to begin with. If any standard as written meets the first 3 criteria, you want to mark that as a draft priority standard. And then when you've gone through the unit and all the standards, if you are below 3 or above 8 in the number that you've marked as priority, then you're going to go back and do some rewording, repackaging, some paraphrasing in order to get more standards into a single standard statement. So it's just you helping students make their learning manageable by repackaging. You do it all the time when you are told in lesson planning to state the learning objectives, in which case you use the educational jargon and then state it as the students will kind of statement in their language. So you've done this. There are some examples in the slide deck from American history. This first example, there are 7 standards in the particular unit, and when the teacher who did it used the tools that are linked here in your slide deck, he found that there out of the 7, 3 of them met that criteria to be priority standards. And so he reworked them, reworded them in order to have 3 encompassing standards. And here's the example document that was worked through. And then there's another one provided for math that you're going to be able to work through. And in a nutshell, it's like you having a conversation with the teacher who's going to get your kids next. So if we were having this conversation around a unit in math, we might go to the next teacher. If I'm teaching Algebra 1, I might go to the geometry teacher and say, when your students come to your class for geometry after this semester, what do you really wish they had mastered from my Algebra 1 class? And then that the geometry teacher's response is here on the right. So as I'm creating my units for mastery, I'm going to focus on those particular kinds of skills. And then we've created blank documents for you to go through this process. So before we come back together, you're going to take the unit that you identified, you're going to take the standards that are identified within that unit and go through this 3-step process. And when we come back together, we'll share out our priority standards and then start talking about the instruction that supports them and assessment. Have fun doing it. Remember, you've always got support by email. Use it if you have any questions, and good luck.